Hey, what's going on, family? So, in our last video, we talked about mental fortitude and how important it was to have it, right? In this video, no, actually, just to summarize what mental fortitude, what I was trying to say in that video was that even throughout your experiences that you may or may not have, you don't need it. You don't need them to define you and who you are, right? You can use those experiences to refine who you are, but it doesn't have to become all of you. Okay, that's essentially what mental fortitude is about. It's being able to have those negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative experiences, and not really looking at it as a um, thing that completes you, if that makes sense. In this episode, we're going to be talking about um, emotional control, right? When I was a young kid, emotional control was a skill I did not have whatsoever. I did not have the space to express my feelings in the way that I wanted to. I didn't have the intelligence to be able to identify what I was feeling. And ultimately, it led to me expressing it in different ways that weren't really healthy. Emotional control, at least it's two things, right? It's the ability to identify the emotions in yourself and how you express those, but it's also um, how you manage other people's feelings too, just being constant of that. We call it emotional intelligence. I call it emotional control, whatever you want to call it. And I'll make this very clear before I even start this video, right? When it comes to emotional control is not disassociating from your feelings. Emotional control is not stuffing your feelings down. Emotional control is not ignoring what you feel whatsoever, okay? At least in this video, it's in part one of the first things that I did to get over that situation when it comes to how I treated my feelings by disassociating it, ignoring it, or just stuffing it down was that I identified them. As a young kid, if I didn't know what the heck I was feeling, I would just be overcome by it because or I just try to kill it, one of the two. But both methods are unhealthy when it comes to emotional expression, right? Um, Jesus loves me. This is hard, but yeah. The first thing you have to do when it comes to emotional control is identify. You cannot control it if you don't know what it is. You can try to, but if you don't know the nature of the emotion you're trying to control, then ultimately you're not really going to get anywhere because you don't even know how to combat it properly. Obviously, one of the first things I learned when it comes to um, identifying my emotions was just increasing my emotional vocabulary. Okay, what does that mean? I discovered this when I was on punishment. Right, basically, I forgot what I did, but instead of my parents beating me, disciplining me, I um, I essentially was told you're going to do the entirety of the A part of the dictionary, right? And it was one of the most stressful experiences of my time. I never want to do it again. If you have children and you want to, give them one of those really dumb punishments that are make them remember, make them write the dictionary. Anyway, from that experience, I saw the word anxious, right? And I read the definition, I wrote it down, but reading it, I realized that like, hey, this is literally describing what I've been feeling this entire time. And I remember that. And even after punishment, I would still go into the dictionary and look up and just read all the words, all the B's, all the C's, all the D's. And I had an understanding that, being able to name what you're feeling, being able to define it, being able to articulate it, it gives you such an advantage. As a kid, and I try to talk about my feelings, whenever I tried to express it, since I didn't even know what I was feeling in the first place, it either got misunderstood, minimized, or dismissed altogether, right? And that eventually led me to not expressing myself whatsoever to my parents because if one of those three things were happening, I didn't really have a voice in trying to express myself. So instead, I just shut up and just did whatever. Now, obviously, that came out in other ways, but I didn't really have the environment to express myself um, in a healthy way, right? And when I started defining the terminology for the way I felt, I started having an understanding that there's a very distinct difference between um, being angry and being frustrated, right? There's a big difference between me being anxious and being overwhelmed, right? There's a big difference between me being sad and me being depressed, right? Being worried. Matter of fact, even recently, I was having a discussion with somebody in my youth group, and I was just talking about how when it comes to my job or whatnot, it was going to be very difficult for me to, figure out a way to, try to save enough money to be able to move out by the time I'm 25, 26. And I was just kind of worried about it, right? And the way this person broke it down to me, it's like worrying about something. It's like having it in your head and doing nothing about it. Like if I was worried about being kicked out and I wasn't trying to get a job or trying to, work some overtime and trying to save and not having a plan that I'm acting on, then I would be worried about it. So instead of saying I was worried about it, I was more so anxious about it because I don't know what the heck is going to happen. The economy is going out the wazoo, and I'm like, dang, I'm just a young kid about to go through another recession, and my life is going to suck, right? Anyway, but being able to identify I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated, instead of everything that felt like anger was anger, was very eye-opening to me. And from there, I can actually have a framework on how to handle said emotion when I'm feeling frustrated, or when I'm feeling anxious, or when I'm feeling or I'm feeling overwhelmed. There's stuff that I can do instead of just feeling angry, or feeling sad, because I had no other way to identify those emotions. Get a dictionary, read through it. I'm talking about a physical one. Don't look it up on Google. Physical dictionary, read through it. Write down the emotional states that are in there. After being able to identify said feelings, something that I noticed would happen is that I would need to identify how they differentiated in my life. Like just take like nervousness versus anxiety, for example, or anxiousness, because I don't have anxiety. But when it comes to nervousness and anxiousness, what I notice is that nervousness would be more sort of a short term situation by situation based thing. Like if I was going to take a really big test, or if I was going to lift a really heavy weight, that's when I would feel nervous, or the most nervous, primarily because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. And um, the challenge that I hadn't conquered it yet, right? But when it came to, let's say, but when it came to anxiety, that was more so long term stuff, because something I did notice is that, especially in the situation where I may have to move out by the time I'm 26ish, I'm more anxious of what the economy is going to look like, what my life is actually going to look like, and I really don't know how to handle that. 8. I feel like we can do one more. I'm gonna do one more. 8. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Um, Even when it comes to anger and frustration, right? When it comes to anger and frustration, anger is far more explosive, and frustration really feels like pressure. 8. Okay, cool. Huh, huh. Feels like pressure. Like when I'm angry, it just when I feel it. Well, I'm gonna talk about this later. When I'm angry, it just pops out of nowhere. When I'm frustrated, it's like a boiling pot that you can kind of feel the heat, but it's like it hasn't boiled over yet, if that makes sense, right? Another thing that I did is that when I understood the physical differences, or the definition differences between um, between you know the various emotions that I was feeling, another thing that I did or would do is I would try to identify where I felt it in my body. Hey, I was like, oh crap. Now we're gonna take a rest. But when it comes to my various emotions, another thing that helped me was being able to identify where I felt it. Like when I was nervous, I would feel it in my stomach. I would feel like I would have to vomit, right? When it was when it's anxiousness, I feel it in my back, and like I feel it rise from my back, kind of like I'm not sure if y'all seen Alien, but I think it's not Romulus. I think it's in Covenant, where essentially one of the aliens would just like pop out of the dude's back, and the other one like popped out of the dude's mouth or whatever. Like those two, it's basically like that, right? The alien, the emotion is still the same, but the way it comes out is different, right? Or similar, but it's different. Anyway, that really helped me be able to identify what I was feeling, how I was feeling. Using body cues to really see, using body cues to really identify how I was feeling or to confirm how I was feeling really helped me out a lot because sometimes I'll be overwhelmed in my mind trying to calm myself down, but I don't even know what the heck I'm trying to calm down in the first place. And those body cues help me out a lot. I may not get it right every time, but it's a lot better. It's a lot better to feel that and see that than to not know what to do with that at all and just have the intellectual knowledge, but not the emotional or bodily wherewithal to be able to identify those things so you can do something about it. And now here is where the third step of emotional control, at least in this first part, comes into play, right? When it comes to emotional control, something that people may miss out or look over is 8. I feel like I was 2, but I think I did 2 more. But basically, the way you feel at the time is not a sign to act on the way you feel, right? Now, obviously, in the self-help space, this is very obvious, very important. But I want to remind you of it because it's just sometimes it's just a good reminder, right? Being able to, she was being able to feel anger, feel frustration, feel sadness, feel anxiety. Do more. Okay, whatever. Okay, but essentially, being able to identify your feelings, sorry, being able to not react to your feelings when you first feel them will give you such an advantage, right? It's there's too many situations I could talk about, but I know in martial arts specifically, we stress de-escalation, right? And being able to calm down the other person, being able to talk yourself down if you're feeling emotions, and obviously it doesn't work every time because we still have the exceptions to the case to certain cases. In this case, we have exceptions, but the whole point is that you want to take a mental note. This is where mental fortitude comes in, and acknowledge what you're feeling out right now, whether some guy got you pissed off because he said something that wasn't true, or because your lady said something that hit you in the heart or whatnot. But you want to be able to pause, okay? Want to be able to pause. The pause between when you start feeling something and when you react to it is going to save you a whole lot of time, maybe jail time, and just a whole lot of problems down the road. Because if you, I forgot to do the dips. I forgot to do dips, dude. Jeez. I was wondering why I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. Being able to accurately identify your emotions and then being able to pause will maybe the difference between you escalating a situation and navigating a situation. It might be a difference between building and maintaining a relationship, making it more firm, or destroying it altogether. And keeping your emotions in check will help you navigate life. Emotional control gives you freedom of being ruled by your emotions. Okay? You want to be in the driver's seat of your feelings, not in the passenger seat. You don't want to give full vent into your anger and start punching people at a bar because you're upset. We all know somebody who's like that. You don't want to feel something sad and just break down in tears, especially if it's something that's not really worth breaking down in tears for. And y'all can look that up. I don't really care about that, but I'm just using those as an example because that's some stuff that I had to deal with when I was growing up, and a little bit now that I can handle a lot better because of these steps that I'm talking to you about. So far we talked about identifying your emotions, pinpointing how it feels in your body, how it feels in your mind, being able to identify that in your regular life, and also pausing, giving yourself a pause between the when you feel something and when you react to it. Learning to identify emotions in learning how to identify my emotions and then learning to precisely or accurately, identify them. See, that was 8. You didn't see the other 8 because I had edited it out because other reasons. But regardless, essentially from there, I need to learn how to express it because even if I was able to identify it, and even if I was able to pause and being able to find out why I was feeling something, I still had a problem with articulating my feelings, expressing my feelings. Instead of dismissing, instead of pushing them down, instead of ignoring them, I had to learn to actually let it out, but let it out constructively, let it out in a healthy way, right? So my 3 steps for that is literally clarity, specifying, and constructiveness, right? Clarity meaning, what do I feel? How accurately can you get down to it, right? Instead of anger, do you feel frustration? Using that as an example. Second thing is knowing why you feel it, right? Why do you feel anxious? Why do you feel angry? Do you feel like you're not being heard? Do you feel like you're not being considered, right? I need to do these pull-ups. 1 second. From there, the last one is constructiveness. So now that you know what you feel and why you feel it, figure out a way to constructively express it, right? Instead of being angry and just yelling and screaming and doing whatever you do and get angry, let's take a step back. What I used to do is I used to take inventory of what I felt. Sometimes I would even write it down. I would write it down. Hey, look, I feel angry. Okay, do you actually feel angry? No, I feel frustrated. How do I know that? Based off how I feel and how it feels in my body. Right, from there, I try to understand why I felt frustrated. And it was because I was feeling dismissed, right? Because I feel like I didn't really have a voice, right? The last thing, Jesus loves me. But from here, and being able to express that, writing it down, rehearsing it before I was able to express it in that moment. And I understand that might be a really long process in the beginning. It was when I first started. But when you start doing that over and over again, clarifying what you feel, specifying why you feel it, and being able to articulate it on paper or in your mind, you could do it a lot faster over time. And eventually it just becomes an automatic thing. Or not even an automatic thing, it becomes faster. Sometimes to the point of being automatic, because sometimes you'll be in the same situation over and over again, and you'll learn how to react to that, right? For example, when it comes for me nervousness, right? I know that, when it comes to me being nervous, I have to take a deep breath and try and remember all the knowledge that I had, when I'm taking a test. When I'm anxious, I go down and write it down in a plan, and I throw it on God, really. Because I'm just like, at some point, I get tired of being anxious, and I'm just like, screw it, whatever. Here you go, God, I'll give it to you, right? But that's basically how it looks like. I know I'm saying the same thing 3, 4, 5 different ways, but essentially figuring out what you feel, why you feel it, and being able to express that constructively, it's going to help you a ton. When it comes to emotional control, if you don't have a strong internal foundation, you are going to be swayed around in a lot of different ways, and bag your mental fortitude if you can think straight when it comes to people's opinions. But if someone says something that ticks you off and it moves you off your square, then what was the point of having a mental fortitude when your emotions are going to override whatever you think? Was I even 10? I forget. But the Bible essentially talks about how the heart is deceitful and beyond cure, right? But the only person who can understand it is the Lord, right? Similarly, you're not going to understand everything, right? When someone says, even if you were in a situation that you thought you overcame, sometimes those feelings are still going to be there. No matter what you do, that might just be a thorn in your side. Regardless, if you have no internal foundation, if you have no mental anger, you may be prone to being pushed around by opinions online. You may be pushed around by external forces that are on you. Propaganda, as an example, right? You might be influenced by how you make your girl feel, right? You might be influenced by how you want other people to view you, right? Because of the emotional feel-good of that. We're social creatures. Anyway, if you don't have a sturdy foundation of where you are emotionally, of where you are mentally, none of this crap I'm talking about is going to matter. Please, 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 please. If you get nothing else from this video, right? All emotional control is being aware of your feelings, identify your feelings, being able to constructively express them, and really getting to know yourself more. Document it if you have to. That's where your strength comes from when it comes to your emotions, right? Anyway, this is episode 3, I think. Episode 3, part 1 of emotional control. The next episode we're going to be talking about is emotional, managing other people's emotions. And I think that's important.